Hello, welcome back. In this section we're going to look at a couple of settings to do again with materials, also with saving and managing content, and we're going to start to look at matinee. Okay, so the first thing, well, there's quite a few new things that I need to introduce you to. Number one, we've had a bit of a change around with the material for Ed. What I've done is I've added a whole list of nodes, and these are working, just delete some of these unnecessary ones, to add a reflection sort of texture that you can see on here. So we're working with vectors now, and what happens is that dependent on the position of this object in the world, or dependent on the position of the camera, depending on which one you choose, you can get reflections. And you can do this in several ways. What I'm going to do is introduce you to the way that I've set this up, and introduce you into how we can grab things like this from other materials. For instance, what we can do is we can come in and grab materials in another file. Just hit Control C and hit Control V, and it will actually paste them into Ed material, which is really useful because you don't have to keep recreating the same thing again. Okay, so what we can do is this one, we've got a reflection vector. So all we need to do is drag this in, and this now is a 3-point float. And what that means is it's doing X, Y, Z with 3 values. And what Epic have done is they've put a mask on. Now, this is where abstract thinking starts to help a bit. We've got RGBA, and they've masked out 2 values. And the reason why they've done that is so that they can convert the 3-point into a 1-point, and they're just accepting the blue channel, in this case probably the Z. They're then putting it into a multiply, which is then a constant 2 vector, and then this effectively alters how the reflection is tiled almost. Let me show you. If we can increase the numbers on here, you can see how much the reflections are repeated, so I can tone that down to back to 1. This is then fed into a cube map, which is an Epic texture. Okay, and again this is multiplied. Well, this place 0.2, so it's toned down, darkened if you like, thrown into an add with our original texture, and this is what we get. And the best thing to do is just to play around with these values just to see how things are affected, and just deconstruct, re-engineer some of the Epic materials. For instance, if let's have a look at some of the parts here. If I alternate how this reflection section is multiplied, put it up to 1 now, our reflections become a lot more prominent. But I can tone it right down to 0.01, and you can barely see it. So this is quite useful because we could make a slight hint of this sort of metal paint, but we can also still keep kind of a gritty thing that's going on. The other nice thing that we can do is we can also mask areas. So what we could do is we could make an alpha section of this texture, and then only display the reflections, say, on the windscreen, which is kind of a nice one. Go back down to what's happening with my specular. I've got a multiply node, so my texture sample's going into a multiply, and then I've got a constant, which I can drag out here, and this constant has got any value we want. Let's put up to whatever we like, but generally speaking 0 to 1. Here's from black to white, and everything after that adds, if you like, additional value to it. So I'm multiplying my texture by 1.5, so that's increasing all of the range of values in there, so it's making my texture or my specular more prominent. So for instance I can make for 8, and you can see how it's whacked up the specular on Ed, so it makes it a lot more shiny. And this sort of thing is really quite useful when it comes to adding more lighting information or more detail to your actual texture. So you can see now that certain sections of Ed has just been blown up massively by that. Obviously that's a bit of a crazy amount to put on my texture there, but that's what that's there for. The same reason for the one below. We can increase or decrease the values in our normal map. In this case I've just left them the same, so I didn't deleted the wrong ones there. Come back. So yeah, in that case I don't need those. Drag that back in, like so. So those are just the material modifications I've done. Just to run through again, reflection into a mask, which converts it just to one value. That value is then multiplied, although in this case we might even be able to get rid of that multiplier. Let me just check. No. Okay. And what I wanted to do was that. Initially, you see, when I copied this material over from the other folder, they had it so that the reflection, or the reflection vectors, were actually multiplied several times, so that it made a difference. So I'm just going to see if there's actually any merit to me. No, I can get rid of those as well. Okay, so I mask my reflection, pass it on into the UVs of my cube map, and I'm tightening that by a very small value here. I'm going to put it up a bit. In fact, I'll put it back to 2, and adding it together. And that's the sort of the shiny effect. So that's quite a nice one. Next, what have I done? Okay, I've changed my actual file name here to dm-ed209.ut3. And the reason why I've done that is because it automatically gives the map depth match properties, and that affects how this plays from the viewport. So at the moment you can see it's given me access to the game type from Unreal 3. I've got the weapons, I can fire, and I couldn't do that before. You can do that manually if you go into the world properties and change the game type supported. As you can see, I've put a few in here, but you can adjust this, and it basically changes what you're allowed to play with in the editor, and you can add your own author bits and pieces, sections to put all different things in here, screenshots and bits and pieces, so it's really cool. There's loads of functions which are very, very useful in here. So this sort of stuff for server information and bits and pieces, you need to fill that out. Okay, I'm not quite sure if I covered adding a weapon in before, but I'll quickly bring it up. We need to go into our actor classes part of the general browser, navigation point, and then we've got things such as pickup factories, and we can do things like weapon lockers, or we can do just the defaults weapon pickup factories, and it'll spawn something like this. We can expand the properties and change whatever weapon you want. So I've just changed that to the Redeemer just to show you, and for wonderful it's decided not to load that particular one. Let's try another one. What you should do each time you adjust a property on those is to rebuild, because it's cool. There you go, I've got a flat cannon now instead of the rocket launcher. Okay, so it's just a typical sort of thing you can do. All sorts of things in here which are really useful: weapons, vehicles, general sort of actors and properties. So have a look through those. If you want to get into particles, you can start looking at camera effects and things like that. It's really cool. Okay, so what am I going to do? Well, to start off with, I'm going to introduce you to some concepts, and this will lead to a conveyor belt. And what we're going to make is we're going to make a button that opens some doors and sets an army of Ed 209s walking in one direction. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to show you an animation which Chris has made for us. So if I go back to my Ed folder, I'll show you another addition to this 3D ballast set. I've just got to find it first. It's gone hiding. Let's have a look. I'm going to fully load this set. There we go, anim set. So, there should be a section on this that Chris is going to add. So there's Ed, anim set, and now we've also got this awesome walk. So what we're going to do is going to use matinee to move this guy. Okay, so there are loads of ways of doing this. I'm going to show you an easy one first, and then we're going to look at some more complicated ones after. First off, we need to go into Ed, check the movement tab, and change our physics properties to interpolating. So if you've not got that, you need to do that now. Also, I have to go back a step because I've been a bit special. You will need to import the Ed walk animation. Okay, so it's just like what we did with the fire animation earlier. You just import PSA, find the walk, and close it. Okay. Remember to save your package once you're happy with it, or you can just open the one that I'm using at the moment. Either is fine. I'm now going to save with some increments just to keep you guys happy. So this one could be O2. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up Kismet, and we're presented with this wonderful interface here. Now, chances are you will not see anything here. You'll just see lots of ones and zeros in the background and a few tabs. If you do see something there, you're probably going to need to delete it. This is the logic controller for Unreal, and you can do all sorts with Kismet. If I right click on the viewport here, we can bring up all sorts of lists of actions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do new event, and you can probably choose here quite a few things: level startup or player spawned. Either of those is going to work really. I'm just going to go with level startup. And what this means now is that when the level starts, do something. Okay, and what do we want to do? Well, we want to use matinee. And this works the same way as the material editor. Control and left click, and we can move icons. Let me just draw it again, so we go across. So, what we have got now, we've got our matinee, and this is set up. So what we need to do now is make sure Ed is selected at this point, and double click on matinee. This will open up yet another wonderful interface, and this is a bit like 3dsmax's curve editor. And this works with keyframes on the bottom, curves and graphs on there, although it can change, and you'll see that in a bit. This section on the bottom left is more to do with groups, and what we'll do is we'll start off by using that. You need to right click in this grey area here and create a new empty group, and this is going to be called Ed's animation. Okay, and with that selected, we need to now tell it to use Ed209's animation set. As you can see, there's not one there at the moment, so we go hit add new, and we go hunting for it. So mine's luckily selected, So make sure it's selected in the general browser and click use. Okay, and what that does is it gives us the ability to then call any animations from that set. If you don't do this bit, you can't actually call any animation. Right, the next thing we need to do is to tell this group what's going to be in it. So we right click on it, and there's a whole host of properties here, and we're going to use the animation control. You can do all sorts of wonderful things with movement, sounds, effects, materials and those sort of things. We're going to work with purely animation at the moment. Okay, so we have that now. That's the beginning, and what we need to do now is to start with a keyframe. And as we add a keyframe, we get a pop-up box, and there's all sorts of sequences that you can choose depending on your mesh, but with Ed there's just the 2, walk and fire. We're going to choose the walk. You'll notice that because we're in Matinee, it's skipped him across, and we can actually play this now. You can see Ed walk. Okay, and after he gets to those 2 seconds, nothing's going to happen. So if we close this down, you'll see Ed pops back. And now if we play our level from here, Ed has just walked and stopped. Okay, and he will not move from here, he will just stay still, and that's it. Okay. So, that's essentially how to drive a skeletal actor using this system, and there's all sorts we can do with this. We can loop it, we can do different ways of rewinding it, and there's different sorts of things that we can target. And once we can say, once it's completed, what do we do then? Yeah. So there's all sorts of things we can do in terms of like removing, destroying things, and all the rest of it. So it's about messing around with these, to be honest, and having a bit of a play. Because I'll show you an inherent problem with the animation now. I'm just going to go B looping and hit play. Okay, so the level started, and you see he skips back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, back. Yep. So what we need to do is lengthen the animation in max if we wanted to walk down a corridor. So that's one thing that we'll have to look at in a bit. But as you can see, we now have this loop or endless loop going on in Matinee that we can make this sort of corridor or army of Ed 209s. That's quite useful. So at the moment, notice that what happens, I've just gone back to Matinee, I've just double clicked on here. You can see that we've got this start and end red tick, and this deciphers, or this controls, if you like, how the animation is being loaded. So this is going to say that Matinee lasts for 5 seconds. Also, if you look at the Ed walk finishes just after 2 seconds, so now what will happen if we play, and you have to close Matinee when you make these changes. So you'll see that the loop is much faster now, so it goes back to the start much quicker. So it's just little things that you can learn by shifting some pointers in Matinee. That's quite funky to have a go with. And to control this, what you're going to need to do is middle mouse button to shift in and out, or zoom in and out rather, and you need to press both mouse buttons down to move these little red tags. You can actually add and adjust all sorts of things here. You'll be able to copy and paste these onto different tracks and move them and set how they actually work. So there's all sorts of things to have a play around with. You should be able to adjust the timing, how they loop, and all the different bits and pieces. So it's really cool to have a play around with this. What we're going to do in the next set, or the next video, is look at how we can work with a more complicated set of Matinee features. And what we're going to do is have a button drive some doors and have a play around with Ed and see it going to walk again. See you then.